Ever get that feel like you're constantly running around checking things off your to-do list, but at the end of the day, you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what did I actually do today?
Right. And more importantly,
Yeah.
where did I go? Like, where did I go in all that
It's
chaos?
like we're always on, always striving, always
Got to be productive. Got to be.
yeah, got to be achieving something.
Yeah, exactly.
What if?
What if all this doing?
What if that's the problem?
Exactly. What if it's actually the opposite of what we need?
And that's what we're diving into today. We're calling it the art of doing nothing.
Ooh, I like that.
It sounds a little rebellious, right?
It does. It's
Yeah.
like completely against everything we're told, you know? Like our whole culture is built around being busy.
Right. It's like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so stressed. I'm so busy.
Exactly.
But look around. I mean, everyone's burnt out. Anxiety's through the roof, and nobody really
Seems
seems...
happy.
No, no one seems content. So could it be that all this striving is actually the problem?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is. And what's really fascinating is that this isn't some new age, fad or anything.
Right.
We're going to look at some ancient wisdom here. We're going way back to Zen, to Stoicism, and then
bring it all the way to
today,
Really?
to modern science.
Yeah, and see what the latest research is saying. So really, our mission is to help you understand why hitting pause might actually be the most productive
And meaningful.
thing you can do.
I love it.
So let's start with Zen. Let's talk about this idea called Wu Wei. Now, I got to admit, when I first heard like non-doing,
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this is just about being lazy.
Right. Like just sit on the couch all day.
Exactly, but that's not what it's about, is it?
Not at all. Wu Wei, it's not about being passive. It's really about aligning yourself with the natural flow of life, right? It's about effortlessness.
Okay, so how do you explain that? Because it sounds very abstract.
So imagine you're trying to swim upstream in a river, right? Against a really strong current.
Yeah. You're going to get exhausted. You're not going to get very far.
You're fighting it.
Exactly. But if you learn to move with the current, to use that energy.
Then you can actually go somewhere.
Exactly. And you can do it effortlessly, right?
So that's Wu Wei.
That's the essence of Wu Wei. Yeah. It's finding that harmony, working with the natural order of things rather than constantly struggling against it.
So it's not about being lazy. It's about finding that sweet spot
Right.
where you're not forcing things, but you're also not just giving up.
Exactly. And it's powerful.
It is.
When you achieve that alignment, when you're not overthinking or resisting, incredible things can happen.
Yeah. It's like getting out of your own way,
Exactly.
Okay, so this idea of finding that inner peace and kind of going with the flow makes me think of another ancient philosophy, Stoicism.
Oh, absolutely.
And they had a lot to say about finding peace as well, didn't they?
Yeah, the Stoics were all about cultivating this kind of inner peace and resilience, no matter what was happening externally. And there's this quote from Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul."
Wow.
Powerful, right? It's this idea that even when the world feels chaotic, there's this sanctuary within us.
That we can always access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always there.
So I guess the key takeaway from Stoicism then is that peace isn't about our circumstances. It's about what's going on inside.
Exactly. It's about mastering our inner world.
It's interesting, though, because the Stoics weren't exactly passive, right? Like Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. They were doers.
Very true. They were very much engaged in the world, leaders, thinkers, doers. But they understood that in order to be effective out there, you needed that solid inner foundation.
So it's like you retreat inwards to go outwards.
Exactly. That inner retreat was about building unshakable strength. So you could face challenges with clarity and reason, not just react emotionally.
Makes sense. So we've got Zen, we've got Stoicism, both emphasizing the importance of looking inward, finding that stillness. And what's so cool is that now modern science is actually showing us why this is so beneficial.
I know, it's amazing.
So tell me, what's going on in our brains when we just chill out?
So neuroscientists have discovered this fascinating network in the brain called the default mode network, or the DMN. And this network becomes active not when we're focused on a task, but when our minds are kind of wandering.
So like when we're daydreaming or just spacing out.
Exactly. And what they found is that this spacing out, it's not just wasted time. It's actually when our brains are doing really important work.
Okay, so what kind of work are we talking about?
Things like creativity. Those aha moments we get. Often those come when the DMN is active. It's also when our brains consolidate memories, process information from the day, and even work through our emotions.
Wow. So it's like our brain is cleaning house and doing all this important stuff while we think we're just zoning out.
Exactly. So those moments of quiet contemplation, those are actually vital for our brains.
So this completely flips the script on our whole always be productive mentality, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, think about all the great thinkers throughout history, like Newton, chilling under that apple tree, supposedly, when he had his breakthrough about gravity.
Right. Or Einstein, who swore by his long walks to help him think through his theories. And Nikola Tesla, a lot of his inventions came to him during periods of solitude.
So it wasn't always during intense, focused work that these insights came.
Not at all. They often emerged during downtime when their minds were free to wander.
It makes you wonder what kind of brilliant ideas we're all missing out on because we're just so constantly stimulated.
Right. It's like we've lost the ability to just be quiet and listen to our own intuition.
And I think that's part of why the idea of being still can feel so uncomfortable for a lot of people, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, when was the last time you just sat and did nothing without, like, immediately grabbing your phone or finding something to do?
You know, it's funny because that discomfort, that's not something stillness creates.
It's just revealing what's already there.
Exactly. All those unresolved emotions, those worries, the questions we avoid, stillness just brings them to the surface.
So it's like a mirror reflecting back what we're usually trying to distract ourselves from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can be tough to face, but it's also incredibly powerful.
Okay, so we've established stillness is important, but how do we actually do it? In our busy, nonstop world, how do we make space for it?
There are actually a lot of practical ways to cultivate stillness.
Mm.
And you don't need hours and hours. Even small pockets of silence can make a difference.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, one of the simplest is to just schedule a few minutes each day to sit quietly without any distractions.
Mm.
No phone, no TV, no music, just you and your breath.
So like a mini meditation.
Exactly. Even 5 minutes can be beneficial. And going for walks without your phone. Just observe your surroundings. Let your mind wander.
Yo, I like that one. Just be present in the moment.
Yes. And try to embrace boredom. I know it sounds strange, but when you feel that urge to check your phone or find something to do, resist it. Just sit with the boredom and see what happens.
That is a challenge, but I can see how it could be valuable.
It is. Other things you can try. Journaling, even without a prompt, just to clear your head. Meditation, of course, is great. Disconnecting from social media regularly.
Like a digital detox.
Exactly. And you know what's surprisingly helpful? Reading philosophy, especially the ancient texts.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
It gives you this wider perspective. It helps you realize that this struggle with noise and distraction, it's not new. It's a timeless human experience.
Makes you feel less alone in it, I guess.
Exactly.
And it's interesting how these practices, they sound passive, but they can actually lead to a greater sense of control in our lives.
Absolutely. The more we practice stillness, the more we develop that ability to choose how we respond to things, rather than just reacting automatically. Like Epictetus said, we can't choose what happens to us, but we can always choose how we respond. And stillness gives us that space to choose.
It's that pause between the stimulus and the response.
Exactly. And that pause is everything.
So we're back to this paradox of doing nothing. You mentioned that earlier. It still sounds kind of counterintuitive to me.
It is, right. But think about it. When we're constantly chasing something, a goal, an answer, even just the next distraction, we can miss what's right in front of us.
We get so focused on the pursuit that we miss the present moment.
Exactly. But in stillness, when we stop chasing, that's when things can actually start to come to us. Clarity emerges from the silence. It's like if you shake a snow globe, you have to let it settle before you can see clearly.
I love that analogy.
And in that stillness, we can start to distinguish what truly matters from all the noise.
The signal from the noise.
Yes. Our genuine callings from those fleeting desires, our purpose from those impulsive reactions.
Okay, so I'm getting this. Stillness is important, but it's hard. And honestly, it can feel kind of scary. So what would you say to someone who's listening who's like, okay, I want to try this, but I don't know where to start?
First, I'd say you don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to be perfect at it. Just start small. 5 minutes a day. A walk without your phone. Just notice what happens. And remember, you don't need to be constantly striving. Sometimes the most profound thing you can do is simply be present. Breathe. Notice.
Just be.
Exactly. And I know it can feel like going against the grain in our busy world, but that's why it's so powerful. The world is incredibly loud. Dare to be the quiet.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so we've talked about the philosophy and the practice of stillness, but let's go a little deeper into the science. What's actually happening in our brains when we embrace stillness?
So we're constantly bombarded with information, right? Our phones, our computers, everything's vying for our attention. And this puts our brains in this constant state of alert.
Like fight or flight mode almost.
Almost. And that's exhausting. But when we create moments of stillness, our brains can finally downshift. That default mode network we talked about kicks in, and it starts doing all that important internal processing.
So it's like giving our brains a much needed break.
Yes. And it's not just about resting, it's about allowing our brains to do some really deep work. Self-reflection, making connections, understanding our emotions.
And you mentioned that this practice of stillness can even lead to physical changes in the brain.
It can. Our brains are incredibly adaptable. They can actually rewire themselves throughout our lives, which is what we call neuroplasticity.
Like we can actually change the structure of our brain.
Exactly. And studies have shown that practices like meditation, which cultivate stillness, can lead to increases in gray matter in certain areas of the brain. Well, the hippocampus, for example. That's a key area for learning and memory. And they've also seen decreases in gray matter in the amygdala, which is involved in stress and fear.
So basically, stillness can actually make our brains healthier and more resilient.
That's what the research suggests, yes.
That's pretty amazing.
It is.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and go back to Zen. You mentioned that teaching, don't just do something, sit there.
Yeah, that's a classic.
What's the wisdom behind that?
So in Zen, they practice this form of meditation called zazen. And it's all about just sitting still. But it's not about escaping life. It's about being fully present in the moment, just as it is.
Without judgment.
Exactly. And the goal isn't to achieve some kind of blissful state. It's to simply wake up to reality.
To see things as they are.
Exactly. And when we do that, we can start to see that we're already complete. We don't need to constantly strive for something more.
It's about letting go of that sense of lack.
Exactly.
You also mentioned those koans, those Zen riddles. How do those fit in?
Ah, yes. Koans are fascinating. They're these paradoxical questions that are designed to kind of short-circuit our logical minds.
So they're not meant to be solved intellectually.
No, they're meant to be experienced, to kind of jolt us out of our usual way of thinking and into a more intuitive state of awareness.
I see. So it's another way of getting to that state of just being.
Exactly.
So we've talked about Zen, we've talked about how it cultivates stillness, and we've talked about how that connects to this idea of inner peace. Now, I want to go back to Stoicism for a minute. How did they view inner silence as a source of strength?
So for the Stoics, it all comes down to reason and virtue. They believed that by quieting the mind, we create space for our higher faculties to guide our actions. Like Marcus Aurelius said, we need to find that quieter, more untroubled retreat within ourselves.
And that's where true strength lies.
Exactly. Because when we're not ruled by our emotions, when we can respond to challenges with calm and clarity, that's when we're truly powerful.
So it's not about being emotionless, it's about being in control. So we've got these ancient traditions, both East and West, pointing towards the importance of stillness. It makes you wonder if this isn't something universal, something deeply human.
It really does.
Yeah.
And, it's not just Zen and Stoicism. There are so many cultures that have practices focused on stillness and non-doing.
Oh, like what?
Well, in Japan, you have ikigai, which is often translated as reason for being, but it's really about finding joy in the simple act of living.
Yeah.
And then the Dutch have niksen, which is literally the art of doing nothing.
Just being idle.
Yes. And it's seen as a really important practice for well-being. We already talked about Wu Wei in China. And even the ancient Greeks, they had this concept of apatheia, which is about finding a state of serene untroubledness.
So it's like this idea of finding peace and contentment through stillness, it transcends cultures.
It does.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of stillness. Let's flip the script for a minute. What happens when we don't make space for stillness? What are the costs of being constantly on the go?
The costs are huge. I mean, burnout is a huge problem these days. People are just exhausted emotionally, physically, mentally. And a lot of that comes from this constant pressure to be productive, to be doing something all the time.
And all that stress can't be good for us.
It's not. It affects our concentration, our decision-making, our relationships, and it can actually make anxiety worse.
How so?
Well, when we're constantly trying to quiet our minds, to push away those anxious thoughts, it can actually make them stronger. But when we allow ourselves to just be with those thoughts, to observe them without judgment, they often lose their power over us.
So it's counterintuitive, but sometimes facing our fears head on is actually the best way to overcome them.
Exactly. And we can't forget about creativity. When our minds are constantly cluttered, it's hard for new ideas to emerge. Stillness creates that space for inspiration.
You also mentioned earlier those Greek concepts of chronos and kairos. Can you remind me what those are and how they relate to our modern lives?
Sure. So Chronos is that linear clock time. Deadlines, schedules, the time we measure with our watches.
The time we're always rushing against.
Exactly. But Kairos is a different kind of time. It's about the opportune moment, the time that's ripe with meaning and potential.
So it's more qualitative than quantitative.
Exactly. And unfortunately, modern life is very much dominated by Chronos. We're constantly rushing, always focused on the next thing.
So how do we bring more kairos into our lives?
Stillness is key. When we slow down, we step out of that constant rush and allow ourselves to experience time in a more meaningful way.
So it's not about having more time, it's about using our time differently.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how stillness can help us feel better, but you also mentioned that it can actually improve our performance when we are engaged in activity. Something about flow states, right?
Yes. Flow is that state of being completely absorbed in what you're doing, where time seems to disappear and you're just totally in the zone.
Yeah, like when you're so focused on a project that you lose track of everything else.
Exactly. And to reach those flow states, we need to be able to quiet the mind, to focus our attention.
And stillness helps us do that.
It does. Because when we're not constantly distracted by our thoughts and worries,
Yeah.
we can direct our energy more fully into whatever we're doing.
Okay, so let's get really practical here. You gave us some initial ideas for cultivating stillness. Can you give us some more specific techniques?
Sure. So for scheduled silence, I recommend setting aside at least 10 to 20 minutes a day where you just sit and do nothing. No phone, no computer, no distractions. Just be present with yourself.
And you said we should even embrace boredom.
Yes, boredom is where the magic happens. It's where new ideas come from. And mindful observation. This is about focusing your attention on the simple sensory experience, like your breath, the sounds around you, the feeling of your feet on the ground.
So it's about bringing awareness to the present moment.
Yes. And then there's journaling, walking slowly, creating those Sabbath moments where you disconnect from technology, and practicing breath awareness throughout the day.
These all sound great, but I think what might be most challenging for people is just the idea of slowing down in our fast-paced world. It's almost like stillness is a form of rebellion.
It is. It's a rebellion against this idea that we always have to be doing something, that our worth is tied to our productivity.
And you mentioned Steve Jobs earlier. He was obviously a very driven person, but even he recognized the importance of stillness.
He did. He said, if you don't have time to think, you don't have time to truly live. And I think that's so true. We've become so addicted to distraction that we've forgotten how to just be.
And in that forgetting, we lose touch with our true selves.
Exactly. Stillness is about remembering who we are beyond all the doing.
That's powerful.
And, this isn't just a modern idea. It's something mystics have been talking about for centuries.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, the Sufi poet Rumi talked about listening to the voiceless voice, which is that wisdom that lies beyond words and thoughts. Eckhart Tolle said that stillness is where creativity and solutions to problems are found. And in Advaita Vedanta, they believe that silence is the very ground of being, pure awareness.
So even in these very different spiritual traditions, there's this common thread about the importance of stillness.
Absolutely. And it's not about escaping the world. It's about connecting with a deeper reality.
And what's really fascinating is how these ancient ideas are now being backed up by modern science. You mentioned some of the research earlier.
Yes, it's amazing to see how science is starting to catch up with what these ancient traditions have known for so long. For example, they're finding that experienced meditators who cultivate deep states of stillness show increased gamma brainwave activity, which is associated with higher states of consciousness and compassion.
Wow. And there's that research out of Harvard about meditation and telomere length.
Right. Telomeres are those protective caps on our chromosomes, and they're linked to longevity and aging. And they've found that people who meditate regularly have longer telomeres.
So stillness could actually help us live longer.
It's possible. And then there's epigenetics, which is the study of how our environment and lifestyle can affect gene expression.
So it's not just about our genes, it's about how those genes are activated.
Exactly. And they're finding that practices like meditation and stillness can actually change how our genes are expressed, in positive ways.
So it's like we have this innate capacity for healing and well-being that's activated through stillness.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Okay, so for our listeners who are feeling inspired and want to start incorporating more stillness into their lives, what are some key things to remember?
I think the most important thing is to be kind to yourself. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to do it perfectly. Just start small. And remember, it takes courage to pause in our busy world. It takes discipline to observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment. And it takes trust to let go of the need to control everything.
So it's a practice, not a destination.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to reiterate that choosing stillness is not about being lazy or apathetic. It's about becoming more fully alive.
Yes, it's about connecting with your true self. Beyond all the doing, it's about reclaiming your inner peace.
Well said.
Thank you.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or just lost in the noise of the world, remember this. Stop, be still, and listen. Because in that stillness, you might just find the peace, the clarity, and the connection you've been searching for.
And as you go out into the world, remember these questions. When was the last time you truly did nothing? What are you afraid might surface if you allowed yourself to be truly silent? What wisdom emerges when you simply sit with yourself? How might your life transform if you paused, even for just 15 minutes a day? And can you trust that stillness is not something you have to chase, but something that's already within you waiting to be discovered?
Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.